The next type that I want to look at is union type. So for instance, I can have a variable. So let's say user ID, for instance, and I can give it a type of number, and that can also be a string. So I'm going to put a pipe and then I pass in string. So that is my variable. I give it a union type. And to do this, you use two different types and then you put a pipe in the middle. And you can keep doing this. So you can say it can also be a Boolean, and that will be just fine. And I can also say this can actually be an object with a name of type string. That would work as well. You probably don't want to go crazy with this, like you have like 5 or 6 different types. In this case, you would probably create some kind of a class or an interface, which I said we're going to look at later. But you can actually have 2, 3, I'd say max 3. And if you have to go for a 4th type, then I would say just find a different way to do what you're trying to do. But you can keep going and going and going, and I don't know when it's gonna stop you. So you can go ahead and try this yourself. You can keep going and going and going with the pipe, and then keep adding different types and see what's gonna happen. So here I'm just gonna go with string or a number. So that makes sense for an ID, and that's just the declaration. So I'm just gonna declare this variable. It can be a number, it can be a string, and that is a union type. And we do this by using 2 different types, and then we use the pipe to separate the 2 different types. So that means now I can go down here and I can say user ID, set it equal to 90, and that would work just fine. And then later I can say the user ID now is, let's say, some string, and let's say it's going to be 88. And that doesn't have to be a number, so I can put let's say the ID is some random string of character, and that works just fine because it's a union type. It can either be a number or a string, and we can put this before. So I just want you to understand that it's not necessary that we have this in order, like because we have the number first, we actually have to put the number here, because you see that this means or, either be this one or this other one. The order here doesn't matter. So I can go down here and paste this. You can see that everything works fine. And if you want to console log this, of course, it's going to give us the value that was last assigned to the variable, in this case 90. Make this a little bigger and run. You can see we have 90. So that is union type. I usually just have 2 of them. I don't go really crazy. So let's go down and let's say let customers, and let's just say that this is an array of number or an array of string. We can do that by just doing the same thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy this and then just pass in the opening and closing bracket. And let's say we're going to initialize this with an empty array. Now, when you do it like this, only this is going to be assigned to the type of the variable. So when I define it like this, if I go down and do customer and try to push a number onto that, and let's say I push 88, you're going to see that it's giving me an error. So what you have to do in situations like this, for instance, when you have an array, is to use opening and closing parentheses. So you're going to do something like this, so that you enclose the type like this, and then you put your bracket. So make sure you remember to use these opening and closing parentheses so that you can define your array type. Otherwise, it's going to assume that this last piece that's the closest to the opening and closing bracket is the actual type, and that's why we were getting this error earlier. So make sure you remember to do that, to add the parentheses before you put your opening and closing bracket. So now I can duplicate this line, and then instead of 88, I can pass in a name here. I can say my name, for example, and you can see that it doesn't complain. And if we try to log this out, so I'm going to copy this line, paste it down, copy customers and paste it in here, and then run this. You can see now we have an array with a number and a string inside of it. So union types, they're very handy. I use them all the time. So I usually don't go above 2 or 3 different types max if I'm trying to solve a problem. Usually 2, I would say. If you have to do like 3, 4, 5 different types for a union type, then I would probably try to find a different approach to solve the problem that I'm trying to solve. But union type, very handy. You use 2 different types and then you separate them with a pipe.